Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims. Yes, we are back once again, breaking this thing down verse by verse into factual, logical statements so we can understand, so we can figure out who or what is Allah, what does he mean by this book, and more importantly for us, non-believers of the world, how does this affect us in the world today? So as I always do before I start, I'm going to warn you now, if you have any doubts as to my factual accuracy or you wish to argue any of the things I'm going to say now or have previously said, please first buy and read one of these and you will figure out after having done so that every word I'm going to say now is 100% true of what Allah says in his book and what Muslims believe today. So let's get started. If you've been paying attention, ladies, gents and Pikachus, and you saw the last episode, you will remember that we started reading the second surah, Al-Imran, in which Allah begins by saying everyone's going to get what's coming to them, and of course he means the Jews and Christians are all going to get killed by his Muslims who he has enslaved, but then he also says a few little tidbits, so it's kind of a mixed up verse, but the gist of it is this: he doesn't hide anything or lie, despite the fact that he gets lots of things wrong and does tell lots of lies, and then he finishes up the verse with his Muslims saying, "Oh Lord, you're so great and lovely, we're definitely loyal and believing of you, and if we're not, please let us know." And then we move on. So, let's start off where we left off at verse 10. Non-believers will never escape death, neither by their wealth nor their numerous descendants, who, by the way, he prophesied they would never have. Allah will use them as coals for his evil fire. End of verse. So, if we break this down, this is one of those nothing to see here moments for Allah having a little senior moment. Non-believers will never escape death, even though I said in a previous verse, non-believers will live forever in pain and grief. So you can't have your cake and eat it, Allah. Either they live forever in grief or they die in sin. Anyway, nothing to see here. He's having another senior moment. We'll come back later. Then he carries on and says, they will never escape death, neither by their wealth or their numerous descendants. Now, if you've been paying attention, you will remember that he said he was not going to let them get wealth or numerous descendants, and I quote, "I will set up not my enemies and rivals, they will be cursed and diseased." So, unfortunately, Allah, another one of your failed prophecies here, I feel, as we are not cursed and diseased, and we actually have lots of wealth and numerous descendants. So, legit fucking no. Anyway, let's carry on. So we move to verse 11. They will suffer indignance and terrible pain, no less than the Egyptians and the Pharaoh did, who derided our signs before Allah called them to account for this. For Allah is severe, strict in punishing his enemies. End of verse. So, if we break this one down, this is Allah telling us, even though what he just said isn't actually true, we do have money, lots of descendants, we are set up, we have our own lands, we're not at war, we're not cursed or diseased, so your prophecy was wrong, but anyway, he's going to carry on with more of his prophecy. They will suffer indignance and terrible pain, which is kind of expected, but the bit is new that we didn't expect. Terrible pain, no less than the Egyptians and the Pharaoh. Now, if you watched the previous episodes in series 1, where we went through the Moses account in the words of Allah, I seem to remember, Allah, that the Moses Egyptians and the Pharaoh were under your control. You were guiding them. Remember when the Israelites were your slaves and you were trying to convince them to bow and worship to you? And when they wouldn't, you said you were going to kill them. But then they escaped along with Moses, and as they escaped, he drowned all your soldiers by letting the sea come back in. Not only that, Allah, remember what you said while they were leaving? Just in case you've forgotten, Allah, let me remind you what Allah said just as the Israelites were escaping. As the Israelites were escaping across the sea which was parted by Moses, Allah was with his angels on the ground, in his own words, saying to the back of the escaping Jews, "I fucking hate you Jews, I'm going to kill you later in a big genocidal war, we're going to kill you all, you fucking evil Jews, you cause all the problems, we hate you, we're going to kill you all." Literally, in his own words, that is what Allah said. So, as we know, the pain that the Egyptians and the Pharaoh suffered was actually you, Allah. That's what you're saying here. You will make them suffer pain like you did those Egyptians and the Pharaohs. Psst, but you blamed it on the Jews, remember? I'm just conferring with Allah quickly. Do you want me to tell them the truth or conceal like you told me to and preach up? He wants me to preach up. Nothing to see here. He definitely didn't punish those Egyptians who were his followers and make them suffer terrible pain and then lose all their battles with all their slaves beating them without drawing a sword and escaping to set up Israel, a far superior, technologically advanced and richer kingdom. That didn't happen. Anyway, terrible pain that like the Egyptian and the Pharaoh did. And the reason, this is even better, the reason, dear ladies, gents and Pikachus, that they suffered the pain of Allah, i.e. the Jews didn't really do it, was because they denied our signs before Allah called them to account for this. So correct me if I'm wrong, Allah, if the Egyptians and the Pharaohs were denying your signs, why did you only pick on the Israelites and try and get them to join Allah worship? You didn't do it to the Egyptians. The Egyptians were observing your laws already. But nothing to see here. It's fine. Don't worry about what you know, what you saw. I'm watching you, says Allah in the book. And if you have any doubts, off with your head, you're dead. That's what this means. So, he finishes up by saying, Allah is severe, strict in punishing his enemies. So it's more of the same as we go through his failed prophecies and threats, which basically never come out truly. Sometimes people die, sometimes people suffer pain, but Allah blames it on the Jews and then forgets and takes credit for it here, even when it's his own people who suffered the pain. So the point of this is, don't worry about that, Jews and Christians and everyone else. If you worship Allah, you won't have to worry, but you're not, so you're going to suffer pain as severe as those Egyptians did. And to make sure you believe this, Allah is telling you, I am watching you, I'm severe in punishment, says Allah in the book. And we move on. Verse 12. Tell the non-believers, you will all be burned together in a pile. Your skulls will be hell's decoration. You will account for refusal to obey and worship me, for Allah is strict in punishment. Very repetitive, but we have to go through it. Otherwise, the Muslims will bitch and moan that we didn't do it properly. So let's break it down. Allah is saying to his Muslims, even though he's just proven that he punished them in the past, i.e. when his Egyptians were trying to punish the Israelites and they failed, Allah put them through terrible pain and punishment, and then used that as a threat to us. So even though he has just demonstrated that he punishes and lies to his own worshippers, now he's saying to his worshippers, tell those evil Jews and Christians and non-believers, you will all be burned together in a pile. Your skulls will be hell's decoration. End quote. Now, far be it from me, Allah, to revise you into modern history as the worst thing that ever happened to humanity, but let me compare you to somebody else who did that. Now, I don't know whether you can remember, something like this happened quite, in recent history, quite recently, where the Jews were put in a big pile and burnt, and their skulls were decorating hell, and it was actually Hitler. So Hitler and his Jews did this, but it was Allah that made it up. This was Allah's idea that the Nazis then did steal. So well done, Allah. You managed to inspire the greatest, most evil murderers this world has ever seen, who also hated the Jews. And then he goes on to say, you will account for your refusal to obey and worship me, for Allah is strict in punishment. Well, you don't fucking say. That's a pretty strict punishment, Allah. Burning someone alive in a pile with everyone else they know, and then burning them in hell forever in the same way. Not much stricter punishments than that going around, but I digress. So I think what Allah is telling us here is that he's trying to remind his Muslims, even though he was going on about how they suffered in the past and how he makes people suffer, even though he's saying tell the non-believers, he is directly threatening his own people indirectly by saying they will. The reason they're going to get burned horribly like this and then burn in hell forever is because, and I quote, they will have to account for their refusal to obey Allah and follow his commands, and they weren't worshipping him enough. So that's the reason they all go to hell after having been burned in a pile, like Hitler was doing in World War II. So don't even think about it, Muslims. I'm watching you. I see and hear all things. Allah will know. That's what he's saying, and that's what this means. So we move on. Number 13. And Allah said, already a holy sign was seen. So before I carry on with this verse, in a previous episode, Allah was saying to his Muslims, I put on a load of holy signs for you guys, so you would definitely know all my prophecies would come out true. even though half of them didn't and the other half are the opposite. So actually none of them did. Anyway, the reason he was doing these holy signs for his worshippers was to prove his divinity over other gods who they're not allowed to believe in or worship, and to get their obedience to him. So I am Allah. He appeared in a cloud, and he put on these holy signs, like, you know, spinning wheels and spinning Christ and stuff in the sky, so that you couldn't disobey, you couldn't not believe them, you had to have seen these signs. But nobody actually witnessed these, and there was no one who had seen them before. So the way Allah convinced his Muslims that they were real, and these signs actually did happen, he used the Emperor's new clothes method, which is to go, if you haven't seen my signs, Muslims, you are stupid and evil. Did you see my signs, O Muslims? And then they're supposed to go, okay, Allah, I definitely saw your signs. I'm not evil and stupid. I saw them too. And then everyone has seen his signs. But as we know, his signs are actually other things in life that happen which are not anything to do with him, like his failure to kill Goliath with Taluth, and David coming out and saving the lives of his insurgents at the last minute by slaying Goliath himself and then going back into Israel. But as I remind you, another one of Allah's failed prophecies was that Taluth was going to lead his insurgents and they were going to beat Goliath. Then after that, they were going to sack Israel and they were going to get hold of the Ark of the Covenant, which of course Allah made, nobody else. And the reason he made it is to prove to his insurgents, his Muslims, that they could beat the Israelis and get the Ark of the Covenant. I know it's a logical fallacy to say the proof that you need that you can win the battle, you will only get once you've won the battle. But it doesn't matter, because they didn't win the battle, they didn't even try. They went, Goliath is too scary for us, how are we going to kill him? And then ran away, and David came out and just killed him. So once again, 1, 2, 3, a trio of bad prophecies that never came out to Allah. And the reason we are knowing this is going to be a thing is because he's saying now in verse 13, Allah said, already a holy sign was seen. That holy sign is this: 2 armies met, the larger force and their leader did die. So he's not talking about Taluth and the insurgents, because the larger force was Israel, and they actually won, and they killed Goliath as well, in his own words, in episode 48 or 49, one of those recent ones. So then he goes on to say, the larger force died, the smaller force who were Muslims did die, and all eyes did see this for themselves. Trust me, bro, there were eyewitnesses, so it must be true. If you don't believe me, Allah says in his words, read my book. So as usual, there's no evidence. He's claiming that there's eyewitnesses, but he's saying to his Muslims, Allah said, in a quote bubble, so his Muslims have not seen this. There's no recorded evidence of this. In his own Quran, it's not recorded that this ever happens, and we haven't seen it. So as far as we know, Allah, graceful, powerful, merciful, all truthful, oft forgiving, this is bullshit. You're fucking talking rubbish again, and this is another prophecy which ain't gonna come out, for the purposes of enslaving your poor old Muslims. But anyway, he finishes off by saying, they saw this for themselves, end quote. Allah caused the Muslims their victory, as obedience doth please him. Let this be a lesson for all who have eyes to see, end quote. End verse, sorry. So, if we break this down, what Allah is doing here is saying, here's an example of the thing that definitely happened. It really definitely happened, guys, O Muslims. And if you don't believe me, off the head, you're dead. Don't have doubts or questions. But the reason you know, O Muslims, that this is really true, and this isn't the only place in the whole history of humanity that is mentioned, is because there were eyewitnesses. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. He says, and all eyes did see this for themselves. But then he said the larger force got completely killed. So all of the eyes that saw this got killed. The eyes the surviving smaller force of Muslims who ran away, they saw it, but they're now dead. So Allah is telling us, we have to believe and take his word for it, that there was loads of eyewitnesses. But I ask you, if Allah is all truthful and telling the truth like he claims, why does he need dead eyewitnesses from a fictional account of a battle that never happened in order to make us believe? Just saying, Allah. Anyway, and we move on. Oh yeah, and then he says, let this be a lesson for all who have eyes to see. So he's literally saying to his Muslims, I'm shouting at the non-believers, this thing happened and they definitely had a bad defeat, even though it was the opposite. They actually won. But the reason I'm saying this is to you, O Muslims. Let this be a lesson to you, O Muslims, to always obey me and follow my Quran. Give all your money to me and worship me. Otherwise, you know what you're going to get. And we move on. Number 14. Men so enjoy the love of covetous things, money and women and their sons, good horses, much livestock and fertile, bountiful lands. As much as they do enjoy these things, Allah is the only truth faith. Allah's goals are the only meaningful ones. End of verse. I fucking love this. This is like one of my favourite bits so far in this new surah. So, if we break it down, he starts off by going, men so love. So what he's saying here, he's appealing to his Muslims' imaginations, if you like, trying to encourage them, because the last few verses have been threats, and bullies, trying to get them to obey him, and saying, if you don't believe me, you will die. It says so in here, so it must be true, says Allah in his book. That was the last bit. So now he's saying, but anyway, cheer up, Muslims. Men so enjoy the love of covetous things. You know, things that you think are good but are just common stuff in the world. They're not that great. So these things are, in the words of Allah, money. That's the most important thing that Allah is saying you want. Money is the greatest thing on earth that you will definitely want. Even though he says the Jews are greedy and he's not, he is the one saying, number one prize in the world, O Muslims, is money. Even though you're not allowed to keep it and you have to give it all to the mosque. Money's the most important thing. Then women and their sons. Despite the fact that we have an overabundance of women in our culture, we have like 10 wives each, and we have daughters, and we have slave wives, and we have concubines. But anyway, money, bitches, and their sons. Now this is a weird one. Why would the sons be important? Oh yeah, that's right, for the enaction of the genocidal end times prophecy. Don't forget about the end times prophecy of Allah when he says, every Jew and Christian and Satan atheist and pagan will be dead in the ground, headless and dying and in sin forever. And how this is going to happen, O Muslims? Guess what's going to happen? You are going to be doing his dirty work, O Muslims. You will be going over there to kill everybody else. And if you do not, off the head you're dead, and you will be as bad as a Jew or a Christian. So says Allah. So he says all these good things, you know, the good horses, the livestock, the fertile, bountiful lands that you love. As much as you do love this, nah, they're not worth anything. The only thing that's worth something is Allah's truth in his book that you have to read. So get to your fucking reading and worshipping, get on your knees and give him your money. And then just in case that wasn't enough for you, he even says, your goals are not meaningful, only his goals are meaningful. End of verse. So if we break that last bit down, Allah, in his grace and wisdom and mercy and love for his Muslims, even though they're in poverty constantly and they have to be slaves of Allah, he is literally telling them in no uncertain terms, O Muslims, whatever your aspirations are, whatever you want to do in your life and your goals might be, fucking scratch that because they're not meaningful. The only thing that's meaningful is worshipping me and killing the Jews for me. So fucking get to it. That's what this means. And then we reach the very last verse of our reading, number 15. Say, should I give thee all those and well wishes? For paradise is their rightful home, for many pure virtuous virgins for plunder are there, and good measure is to reward ye Muslims. For in Allah's sight, when he looks upon Islam, they are his servants. End verse. Oh no, and then it says, paradise will be your eternal rest, O ye Muslims. End verse. End of reading. So, bearing in mind that this has been a lot of threats and, you know, gore and murdering and forcing his Muslims into obedience at the end of the sword and saying, I will make you poor, I will know what you're doing if you don't do it, so you better get on with it. Then saying those evil Jews and Christians, we're going to fucking torture and kill them, and if you don't do what you're told, you will be one of them, and we'll kill you too. The other Muslims will come and kill you. His Muslims were probably thinking, oh, this is so deflating, I've got no motivation to do his commands. So, to make sure they're motivated, he then says, O Muslims, men, remember all that stuff you like, money, bitches, having fun with your wives and sons, beautiful, bountiful lands, and good horses. None of that stuff's meaningful. Even though that's good, what's even better, in the words of Allah, is Allah worship and his Quran. So you better always worship him. Don't have any questions or doubts. Give him all your money and fucking kill those Jews. And if you do not, paradise will not be yours. And the thing that he says is so good about paradise is, and I quote, paradise is their rightful home with many pure virtuous virgins for plunder. End quote. So, in summary, this whole page is Allah saying to his Muslims, don't be disobeying me like those evil Jews we're going to go and kill, even though you're feeling kind of sad and some of my prophecies have been wrong and you've been on the receiving end of defeats, curses and plagues. Don't have any questions or doubts, O Muslims, otherwise I will kill you and you won't be going to paradise after that happens. But if you do go to paradise, guess what you get, O Muslims? Loads of money and loads of pure, virtuous virgins. You love those virgins, O Muslims, don't you? So get along, kill those Jews and worship me. Make sure you drop all your money off to my mosque along the way, and everything will be peachy fine and you will have your virgins. And that's the end of this video, so I hope you enjoyed that and you learnt something, and I will see you, lovely beautiful people, in the next one. Bye now. And that brings us to our close of the Quran of the Muslims for today. If you'd like to carry on reading Surah 2 along with me, I'll see you back here at 7:15 AM tomorrow morning sharp. So until then, have a great night, God bless you all, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now. Bye 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 bye.